Hi and welcome to Thriver TV, the place to break free from narcissistic abuse with quantum tools and understandings. So today's Thriver TV episode is a Q&A show, and this is a question that I got asked a few weeks ago, and I've just got round to producing this episode on it. And it's a really important topic because a lot of people in the community are dealing with this. And some people think that I only work with people recovering from intimate partner narcissists, and that's certainly not the truth at all. There are many people in the New Life community that are working through a narcissistic family of origin. There are people that are in the webinar groups that are dealing with family narcissists and elderly narcissists, and there's also people that are on the Narcissistic Abuse Recovery Program, up-leveling and healing from this. So let's just start off by the understanding of realizing that narcissism is actually a progressive disease, narcissistic personality disorder. And the reason it is because it's a false self takeover and it's a maladaptation. And anything that's unwholesome and a maladaptation is going to break the person's psyche down and their emotional state down. So narcissistic people, as they get older, if they are narcissistic personality disorder, they get worse. They absolutely get worse. They get more entitled, they get more deranged, they get more unreasonable. They find it harder to get narcissistic supply at times because they've lost their charm and their youth and their energy to be able to mine it. So they're going to tend to line up their targets quite significantly, and it can be a very difficult thing for people to deal with because you can be hooked in significantly to an elderly narcissist, especially if they're a parent, because that's the authority figure. And therefore what you might find is that in the presence of this person, you are regressing back to a childhood state of powerlessness and handing your power over. And there's lots of reasons for that. And a significant one is because of when we're wounded when we haven't grown up the parts of ourselves to be a source of love, approval, and security to ourselves. We are trying to source that from outside of ourselves, from significant others. And we have this fear of criticism, abandonment, rejection, punishment. And we are maladapting ourselves to try and avoid that rather than being a generative, wholesome force to self. So you will be likely, if this episode is relating to you, that you're walking around on broken glass and aspects of your life are really suffering, because if you haven't up-leveled and healed your own wounds, you may be finding it very hard to be the generative source of love, approval, and security that you need to be yourself to generate more of that with the field in as far as healthy relationships and success and being able to be inspired and be on mission and live out your purpose in life. And to add insult to injury, you may be organising all around this elderly narcissist wounds because they've really got you hooked in to granting them your energy, your time, your resources, rather than take responsibility for themselves. And also too, they're lining you up as the dump master for where they can project their tortured inner being onto and blame you for everything. And this is really the portrait of people that have been trying to deal with an elderly narcissist who is still manipulating them. And the truth is, this person, if they're not taking responsibility for their own inner wounding, which people with narcissistic personality disorder don't do, this person's not going to get better. They're going to keep doing what they're doing. So there's no change for them. But as always, if you want to change your experience, you need to change yourself. And where we've had really screwy programming, human programming, is there's all of those beliefs such as family's everything and blood's thicker than water, and it's our responsibility to take care of an elderly narcissist, even if they're highly abusive. And we've really prized things on such as, survival and security are more important than evolution. And that hasn't turned out well at all. Look at our world. Look at the generational patterns of abuse and abused and malfunctioning families and narcissistic behaviour and victims of narcissists. And we can see that this pattern hasn't been working at all. And we haven't understood that evolution is the number one criteria of a wholesome, healthy life. Neil Donald Walsh, I remember years ago when I was reading the Conversations with God series, and one of his expressions stood out so much to me. And it was all about personal responsibility and stop being victims. And what it was to allow an abuser to abuse you is an act of abuse. And this is so true, because when we're in life in the field and we're being abused and something's unwholesome in our body and we know that we're resentful, we're not happy, we're feeling, and we might be playing victim, we're not speaking up, we're not laying boundaries, we're going to other people, we're complaining about it constantly, and we're acting the victim. This is not wholesome just for us. It's unwholesome for us. We feel it in our body and we're not stepping up and we're not changing the thing we're fearing doing. We're stuck in it. But also too, we're not serving anybody else or anything in life by handing our power over that way. We are not bringing abusers to evolution by complying and organising around their wounds and getting ourselves wounded. We're also not setting examples for our younger generations and for our offspring to know that they need to honour their own soul and their heart and their own evolution to be wholesome in the field and to create evolutionary change for not just themselves, for everybody else. So if you are doing that, if you are organising around somebody's wounds and you are being wounded in the process, you are not honouring yourself or your soul, and you're not honouring life, and you're not honouring others. And this is where we really need to grow up our young wounded parts to a different reality where we can stand up and we can lose the guilt, lose the fear. And this is such a problem when we're not evolving, is we're trying to play it safe. We're not making the difficult choices that our soul and our emotions are screaming at us to do. And we're handing power over to try and minimize damage, yet we just continually get damaged. So one of the hugest fears about an older narcissist is, what will the family think? And I'm going to get smeared. I'm going to get scapegoated if I step out and if I say no more. And the whole family could turn against me, and there could be all this triangulation and smearing and, all the things narcissists do. And again, that is a young, fearful wound of persecution that doesn't have to play out that way. So one of the biggest ironies of life, if we try to play it safe in order to not get wounded, we only get more wounded because we're not evolving. And I want to share this story with you because it's just such a good example. A friend of mine, she had a narcissistic father. She has a narcissistic father. And what had been happening with him for years was he was an abuser. He would use up everybody's energy and resources and time, and he would take money and time and all sorts of things, and he would just use up his family members. And then what he'd do is just disappear. The next woman that would come along, he'd drop everybody as if they didn't exist, devalue, discard, go off, do his own thing with this woman. When that would fall apart, he'd come back and he'd want money and he'd want this and he'd want that. And this friend of mine, what happened with her is when she realized that he was a narcissist, she completely unraveled and she went into a 4-year healing crisis because the wounds had been so big with him. That was before she found the quantum tools. That was before she did the NARP program. And when she got on the NARP program and was able to heal and up-level her stuff, he was still away with one of his women. And he turned up back and did the whole thing with the family, cried victim. They all had to bail him out, all this stuff that he did. And what had happened is she'd done enough work on herself to heal the wounding from him that she'd up-leveled all of that old neediness of trying to win his love and approval. She'd become a solid source of that to herself. And she'd also up-leveled all of the fear of what would the family do if she refused to organise around his wounds and play his game anymore. And she was really, really clear on it. So when he came back, she had a conversation with him. She gave him an opportunity to up-level in her experience. And she said, this is the way it needs to be if you're in my life. This is what I will tolerate and this is what I won't. And there'll be no money. There'll be no running you around. There'll be, I'll come and visit you, but only if it's healthy. So he danced around that and wouldn't acknowledge it. But what we really desperately need to understand about boundaries, and most people don't until you've up-leveled and healed enough to become them, is boundaries do not depend on anybody else getting it at all. They're unconditional. It's only us that has to get it. So even though he didn't acknowledge her boundaries, whatever, she was just very, very clear. She was going to live them by action. That was her choice with no fear. So that's exactly how she showed up in the interactions with him, that as soon as he stepped out of line with the things that she would not tolerate, she would just say, Dad, I'm leaving, or Dad, I'm hanging up. And that's what she did. And she also spoke to the family members and she said, well, this is exactly where I stand on this. You can all make your own choices, but I'm no longer blah, blah, blah. And what was really interesting, because it had been a massive fear for her, what would the family think? But because she was so clear and so solid in her inner identity about it, the family got it. They literally got it. So there was no problem there. But again, that was unconditional. She didn't care whether they got it. She didn't care whether they smeared her. She didn't care whether she was the worst in the world, because she got to the place in the field with herself, which was all about self-honor. And that's how we demonstrate to life how we want to be treated. Because she realized, if I don't honor me, how can anything else honor me? Because she absolutely, because of the wounds with her father and her codependent mother, had played out a lot of pain in life. And this was a woman in her early 50s who'd said, enough. I'm going to take a stand and be in the field with life, with myself, in the wholesomest way to create more of that. And if people don't want to get on board with me, that's fine. It doesn't matter. I'm that with myself. So it was really simple. The family accepted it. And then what unfolded with that is she was actually able to have a relationship with her father that was simply within the means of his level of development, which was very poor. He had no resources to care about other people, but she could have 10, 15-minute interactions with him, which were really just talking about himself. There was nothing she could gain from it. However, because she had none of her young, I need his love and approval, and I'm terrified of fear or criticism or punishment, she had none of that in there. She was actually able to have that limited relationship with him, which she said delighted her, because there's no pain around it. So that's just a great example of what can happen when we say, I'm not going to keep showing up in these interactions within my wounded young container that's going to continue to be abused. And what was really interesting with her father was he was still organising the other people, the other family members that weren't up-leveling, some of them followed suit with her and did the work on themselves as well, and some of them didn't. And the ones that didn't were the ones that he could still pull the strings with. He could still play victim, he could still mine their resources, and of course, he was bringing to them the pain that they needed to confront their inner beings to up-level their young, underdeveloped self into an adult self of wholesomeness. And people are either going to do that work or they're not going to do the work. So it's really, I really hope you understand that if you take the steps to try and change the dynamic without having changed your inner being, we can get really beaten up with narcissists, any narcissist. And the truth is, healing from any narcissist is exactly the same premise. Come inside to our underdeveloped subconscious wounds that the narcissist can target and play on, and up-level them beyond the abuse experience into a being who is our own source of love, approval, and security. Because when we're that, we're out of the game. We're just at a completely different vibrational reality. But if we don't do that and we show up within our wounds, that's when we can get really beaten up. That's when we can get the experience of intense smearing and persecution, which throws us into the terror of those survival programs of the feelings of emotional annihilation. And that's when we're likely to get guilted out of it. That's when we're likely to backtrack, hand power over, fall into the trap even harder and in more painful ways because we're not evolving ourselves. So it's really, I am just such an advocate for emotion first, which means really self-partnering and confronting those wounds. And we know what they are because they're our terrors in these interactions. And up-level and heal them so that we can show up in a completely different way. We're no longer that 4-year-old or that 10-year-old or that 6-year-old that's inside us that's still wounded, handing power over. We show up as an adult. And we really realize in the field that evolution is the most important thing. You know, with a lot of elderly abusers, when we lose the guilt, when we lose the trying to be responsible for an adult who refuses to be responsible for themselves, and we let them swim in it, we realize that, well, either A, they're going to find somebody else to organise around them. We don't have to do it for them. They're actually quite resourceful. Or B, that even if they didn't find somebody to bail them out, and if they were to meet their own maker and not even survive, and actually be with themselves and their wounds rather than being able to avoid them through the use of somebody else, using you or someone else as the excuse not to self-partner and meet themselves. If their last time on earth is being with themselves without a scapegoat, that's offering them an incredible opportunity of evolution. And as far as I'm concerned, at every level, that is more loving to somebody than allowing them to use you as an excuse to not meet themselves. That to me is not loving. That's trying to save our own childish wounds and not face ourselves. None of it's wholesome. So I hope that this has really helped give you the incentive to stop the abuse if it's an elderly narcissist, and to really meet those parts of you that are hooked in, that are not dealing with this. Because if you do that, not only will you be able to let go without the pain, it's really going to catapult you on your journey and your generation of your life that you've always deserved, that this dynamic has been keeping you away from. And for your future generations, this is so, so important, because this is not just about healing ourselves. This is about creating a template for the world that is collective because something needs to change. These old patterns that have been playing out family to family to family cannot continue if we want a different world. And the only way we're going to have a different world is one person at a time taking responsibility for their own wounds and their own wholesomeness, to be in the field in a way that honors self and honors life healthily and honestly. If we don't do that, one person at a time, we're never going to change the way things are. So that's it for this episode. And if you enjoy these episodes, I would love you to subscribe to my channel so you can receive regular updates, and like and share and comment. And also too, if you haven't as yet tapped into my free resources, and if you are dealing with a narcissistic elderly person or any narcissist in your life, it's going to help you so much. So you can do that by signing up, by clicking on the button that appears on this video. And I would love you to join me in my next 3 keys to thriving after narcissistic abuse 3-hour free teleclass, where you get to find these young wounds that are trapping you and hooking you in, up-level them to a different reality so that you can get free from abuse. So you can sign up by clicking the button as well that appears. All right, so that's it for me for this episode. So keep smiling and keep healing and go for thriving, because there really is nothing else to do. Lots of love. Bye-bye.